So, hi, welcome to another episode of Talking Around the Library Tree. Today we're talking about sustainability at Lancaster University, and we have two guests with us today. We've got Dr Georgiana Allison, who is Head of Sustainability and is leading on achieving the university's aim of achieving net zero carbon emissions by 2035. I've still got it twice. And we've got Tim Leonard, who's the Associate Director of Space, Experience and Innovation here at Lancaster University. So welcome to you both. And as I said, we're going to talk about sustainability. So we're going to dive straight in. And what does sustainability mean to Lancaster University, and how is this reflected in our values? Do you want me to?
Yeah, that'd be great if you could kick up on that.
So I've been in post 2 years, and I think when I first started, it was very clear that sustainability was articulated mainly through sort of that environmental lens. Now, people refer to the three pillars of sustainability being environmental, economic, and social, and it's often represented in sort of like a Venn diagram with three overlapping circles. The way that I'm trying to move us on conceptually, and this does sort of I guess echo what my own higher education was and what my PhD looked at, and then how I've taught students during my time as a lecturer. It's that nested model whereby all human and economic activity can take place within planetary boundaries. So it's a nested model. So if you imagine it as, rather than three overlapping circles, it's one circle in another, like Russian dolls almost. So everything has to happen within the environmental limits of what the planet can supply. So I'm trying to move us away from sort of two things, moving us away from this sort of environmentally focused sustainability idea, and more into its broader meaning. And once you broaden its meaning, and the UN SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, are a really, really good illustration. Let's park the sort of the limitations of the SDGs themselves, and there are some fairly fundamental sort of questions about how sustainable the SDGs are. But as an illustrative tool, every single thing that anybody does can be attributed to at least one of those SDGs. So, if you think you don't know anything about sustainability, you are likely to know something about one of those 17 SDGs, and therefore you actually do know stuff about sustainability. So I'm trying to broaden the reach of sustainability, and I think going back to the question about how this is reflected in the university values, is there very explicitly as a net zero. So under the values, achieving net zero is one of the university's values. Great, but then if you sort of look beyond the specific language, it's actually there implicitly within everything. So it's there in each of the three strategic goals and each of the three values that underpin those goals. So it's for me, it's there, and it tends to be there explicitly in environmental terms. But if you dig a little bit deeper, or even just sort of drop what you think sustainability means, it's actually everywhere.
That's a really good way of putting it, because the Russian doll, I can visualize that. Obviously I can visualize a Venn diagram, but the Russian doll just made a bit more sense to me. Anyway, I don't know. Tim?
Yeah, I think that's something I've really tried to bear in mind with the work that I've done for the library on sustainability, to really try and take that kind of holistic view of things and step back. And there are, we'll talk more about it as we go on. There are definitely things that we're focused on, perhaps focused very much on environmental sustainability. But I think seeing what happens, sort of in the university strategy around sustainability is really helped to inform that idea of thinking more broadly, of thinking about the wider impact of things, and that includes areas where the library is already very active, like our work around equality, diversity, and inclusion, our work with various communities. So I think it's great to see that kind of broader, holistic approach taken on board at Lancaster. And I think for me as well, I've worked at a range of different universities, and it's fair to say all universities are at different stages on sort of a sustainability journey and are approaching things in different ways. But I will say that I think it's really rewarding to work for an institution which I feel genuinely has invested in it at a strategic level, and sustainability is implicit in its values. And then it's invested really significantly in it as well, because it just varies across the sector. So yeah, I think it's been a really good piece of work to be, feel like we're involved with.
Yeah, and I think that leads us right nicely to the next point of, so what are the challenges? What are the challenges that the university are facing in achieving its goals, its sustainability goals? I think you've nice little segue in.
This is a really good question, and I think the answer to that it has always been, and I've been working in this year is my 20th year anniversary working in sustainability roles, and it's the continued treatment of sustainability as a thing alongside other things. So, given what I've just said about sustainability being implicitly in the university's strategic goals and values, when it comes to decision making, and this is at every level of the university, you might conceptually understanding it as being something quite big and broad and a sort of overarching principle, but when it comes to a decision, it's usually reduced. It's quite reductive. It's treated as in quite a reductive way, and it becomes an issue of cost, or it becomes it's treated as something in competition with other things. So it's about finding those points of intervention in existing decision making processes so that it remains relevant. It has that it's relevant. It resonates with the decisions being made. And I think that for me, and I don't want this to sort of sound negative, but usually when someone says sustainability costs more, that's because of one or two things are happening. One, it's usually been considered far too late in a process or in a decision, and that decision can be anything from what you cook at home to how you make a journey to a big piece, a project, a capital project on campus, or something that you're building at home. It only becomes expensive when you consider it as a thing too late in the process. But if you embed it into the very start of a project, it just then becomes integrated into everything. So it's not treated as something separate. It is driving every decision you're making. So it being treated as something separate, it being considered too late, and usually as well the expense is again quite limited view, in that actually what you're saying is you don't want to spend money on it, on I don't know, a particular piece of furniture or a more efficient piece of electronic equipment. It's about how we make our choices and where our values lie. And I've found in the last 20 years that there is a disparity in values, personal and professional values, and someone might be quite happy to make those more conscientious decisions at home, but when they're spending someone else's money, it's treated very differently. And I used to work for a contractor, a construction contracting firm, and that was absolutely true there as well. So I think it's the biggest challenge for me is not financial. It's becoming too myopic, and remembering that it is ultimately why we are all here. Sustainability is a human problem. It is not an issue about saving the planet. The planet will be fine. It's about ultimately the survival of our species, and we can't just set it aside every time there's something bigger or more important kicking around in the short term. We have to sort of make it part of our everyday decision making.
So and I think that's a really interesting take, but how do we do that? How do you make not make, but encourage people to think about it from the beginning, rather than as an afterthought. How do we go about that? Because it's obviously a we thing. That's not a you thing, is it? What would you recommend?
I saw something, I think it was on Instagram the other day, and it said sustainability, it's not about dumbing down sustainability, it's making it human, making it actionable and impossible to ignore. And the actionable bit comes up time and time again at university, and whenever I talk about this, it's less about the why now. I think people are generally, whether they agree wholesale with the science, whether they agree with the approaches taken by the UK government, or indeed the university, always comes down to, okay, so how and what can I do? And certainly at the university, and this is where Tim and I have been working together, is the things that we buy and how we travel at the university emits more carbon than how we operate our campus. Double the amount, in fact. So it comes down to, okay, so I need to, and we've just been talking about it, buying a bigger screen would cost 50 quid more. Now, that's a decision that might be the right decision, but there will be we are therefore buying the carbon impact of that product. And it's about understanding that every single purchase that we make and every single journey that we make on behalf of the university carries a carbon cost. So it's getting to understand, getting really familiar with your departmental, your own budget code, and what the sort of carbon footprint of that, of your budget is, and then you can start to identify, okay, so do we really need that? Or if we do that, then perhaps we won't do that. What are your sacred cows, and what can you choose to do in a different way?
So yeah, I think following up on that question about sort of, how do we start sort of taking action in this area, but also thinking about the idea about challenges. When I was first to sort of asked to lead on some work for the library in this area, it can feel really big. It can feel sort of quite overwhelming, and you feel this pressure to be very fluent in this, this whole sort of area of study and things like the Sustainable Development Goals and all this. It just feels like a really big thing, and you feel quite, well, what can I do as an individual, or what can the library do as an organisation? But I think, as Georgiana said before, we are very used to making choices in our own lives, and I think many of us make sustainable choices where we can. And I think across the library staff, I would expect that probably is the case. We perhaps feel less empowered in our work, but we are constantly making choices, in lots of activities that we do. So I think where people can feel that this is a very big, overwhelming thing, it's trying to break that down and identify what are the areas where specifically we can make an impact. And as Georgiana said, procurement is a really key area, and the library is a really significant procurer of services. We subscribe to lots of digital resources, we consume physical resources. There's, all of those things involve decisions. Which various staff across our team are involved with making those decisions. So it's an opportunity for us to have an impact, and I think it's just a case of empowering people, and introducing that sort of wider sustainability sort of awareness to help take advantage of those opportunities where they arise. Really,
I think it's about making it less scary. Yeah, that's what I'm getting for both of you.
Yeah, I think people feel that. I know I felt this at first, that there's pressure to make some huge impact, this huge sort of statement impact, and massively cut sort of things right away. And it is a case, I think, of not slowly, but you've just got to learn as you go and take opportunities as they arise. There's an initiative aimed at libraries called the Green Libraries Manifesto, which is spearheaded by SILIP, the UK Library Organisation. We're not signatories of that yet. That talks about placing sustainability kind of at the heart of decision making, and I think that's something, that's an area we want to get to. and we've started to do some work in that area already. But it's a journey, it's a process. But I think at first it just can feel very big, very overwhelming.
The journey comment is absolutely true, and I've used this a couple of times recently to a couple of very different audiences, and I think I find comfort in this quote, which I'm going to get wrong, but essentially it's sustainability is horizon to aim for but never reach. Because if you think, so 20 years ago when my career started, I was in an environmental officer role, and I was literally being dangled upside down in a skip by a bigger and stronger colleague to fish something out that had been illegally placed in there. This was in the middle of Leeds city centre. You know, recycling was only just emerging then, and big sort of pieces of environmental legislation had only just come in. We've moved on so much since that time that to have remained static in our understanding of sustainability then, you know, and then having become compliant with environmental legislation and being like, right, well, we've done sustainability, it completely misses the point. Things change all the time, and when you think that it's a human problem, humans are changing all the time, technology is changing all the time, our behaviors, our values, our interactions with each other, our political ideas, everything and that's what makes it a great area to work in. I love how dynamic it is. I love the fact that it's complex and messy, and it is constantly shape-shifting. So what was relevant 5 years ago may be less relevant now. So like Tim says, aim for it, but know that if and when you do get there, it's going to look really different to what you set out thinking it was going to be. And yeah, it's about those relatable, actionable things that people feel empowered to do, and talk to people about it. As a community, it's largely an issue of communication or miscommunication, really. I think that sort of quite harmful association with tree hugging, hippies, veganism, all the sort of mocking phrases that are used have become a bit of a sort of ball and chain for what is a really contemporary, really important topic that can't be ignored. It can't just be left to the enthusiasts, because the enthusiasts are doing it anyway. It's about making it relevant to everybody.
Yeah, there is a stereotype, isn't there? I mean, I'm a librarian, so there's a stereotype with me.
Yes,
so we're used to that stereotype, and we're used to people seeing it that way. So I can actually understand what you're saying about the stereotype of people who are involved in sustainability. As a profession and as a library, we do adapt, and I'm quite proud in the fact that we're very adaptable as we move along, and we move quite quickly. I'd like to think that. So I'd like to know, how does the library contribute to sustainability, but also how does the university involve students, staff, facilities? And he'll say something else, and he'll say faculties, facilities, the wider university community. How are we involving those kind of communities?
So it's been my biggest priority, really, since I started. As I say, I sort of started and things were quite sort of environmentally focused. Our governance was largely a group of enthusiasts that felt it important to sort of talk about what we need to do. And I think it's fair to say that there was a lot of talk, but not a lot of clear action or agreement on what we needed to do. So with the help of Tim and other colleagues, I've spent a lot of time, cast my net widely to build those relationships across the university. I do feel it's helpful that I've come from a teaching role into this role, so I understand the sort of the world of our academic colleagues and our teaching colleagues, and likewise I've held jobs in facilities departments before, so I understand both worlds. I understand where they can sometimes rub up against each other. And I've just spent a lot of time building relationships to understand, to hear from people like Tim. So what's important to you? How can we help you? How can you help me? Where's that point of intervention? And please, will you join my refresh sustainability governance structure so that we can work together as a much broader set of colleagues who, with certain recurring agenda items, but just being aware of what everyone else is doing and how that helps with the overall objective of achieving net zero has just been massively helpful. And so far, so good. We've got full faculty representation on our governance structure. We've got, I think, almost full divisional representation as well. Our student union chief executive sits on our sustainability board. And I have these regular touch points with students. I do still do a bit of guest lecturing because I love teaching. I think every lecturer would say they love the teaching, but not necessarily the assessment. So I'm happily I don't have to do any of that. So yeah, I've got a great student project at the moment, looking at water consumption on campus and attitudes to water on campus. So, as I say, really spent a lot of time relationship building and giving people an opportunity to feedback, giving people an opportunity to talk about and celebrate their work. So we have the termly sustainability knowledge exchange. So the next one's in 2 weeks. And we've got, different people from different parts of the university talking there about what they're doing. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it feels like it's paying off. I feel like we're in a much better place now than we were a few years ago in terms of that broader understanding of what sustainability means in education.
Yeah, it sounds like you've, going back to a point that you made earlier about the communication and the miscommunication, it sounds like that's what you've been tackling while you're sitting here.
Yeah.
So Tim, what about how does the library contribute? What would you say?
Yeah, well, so not long after I'd been asked to sort of lead on the sustainability work, I met Georgiana and we had just a really positive first discussion, and I think it's just led to a whole range of really positive ways of working, and it's great. I think libraries, you were talking before about stereotypes, I think often surprises people that libraries are very outward looking and look to collaborate a lot and look to get involved with things in areas which some people view as perhaps outside of a library's area of focus, which for us actually feels very natural. We think, well, this is an area we can get involved with. So again, going about sort of experience at other institutions, it doesn't always happen that maybe central sort of sustainability group would look to involve the library, but the fact that we've been really welcomed into that structure of governance. So I attend the sustainability board. Our colleague John Williamson attends the sustainability steering group, which is kind of the more operationalizing things, and it's really great to be represented at those levels. Obviously not, we can't contribute to every area of activity, but there are some things which I think we can be really significant, have a significant role to play in. I think one example of that is, you mentioned the sustainability knowledge exchange that's happening here in the library.
Yeah.
Something at one point that happened in various spaces around the university. The first one I went to, I think, was in the management school, but I think, having it in a central location like the library makes it very open to all. It's not linked to one particular department. It's a very welcoming open space to students and to staff as well. So I hope that's something we can continue, because the ones which are happened here, I think, have been really, really good. So looking forward to attending that one.
Can I just ask, sorry, do people need to book on that, or?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. We'll put a link in the book.
Thank you so much. Natalie will be delighted.
So that's one role that I think we can have to play is helping to facilitate, that kind of community of providing the space for people to come together. And at times, we may contribute to the actual sessions ourselves, but if nothing else, we can help to provide the venue and help to sort of publicize it. So not long after, like I say, I started working on this, like I say, I was trying to absorb a whole lot of information around sustainability and SDGs and all those things. And I was kind of like, I kind of need to map it out in a way that hopefully feels like I can communicate it to colleagues in a way to say, well, what are the areas the key areas in which I think we can be most involved in. And this isn't set, it may well evolve in the future, but it's the best stab at it for now, for the time being. So on our sustainability pages on our website, which we can put a link with this to that as well. So we've mapped out 3 key areas of activity for the library around sustainability. They are building and spaces, which is perhaps the obvious one. And you were saying before around sort of the operation of the campus and things like that. It is the obvious starting point, but we do operate a large building on campus that's open 24/7 in term time. There is a lot of carbon, associated with that. So it's looking at being as efficient as possible. So it is an area we have to have a focus on, and that perhaps feels like in some sense is the most obvious place to start. But in some ways, we can make, and we already have made really good progress in that area. So we worked with the university energy manager, Avery, and did some work with her over the last summer, and just managed to save 26,000 kilowatt hours of electricity in the library building last summer holidays, just by making some really simple changes to how the ventilation works in the building. And that was really quite easy to do. It just needed that attention on it. So that's one theme is the building spaces. Another theme is service delivery, which sounds very vague, but it's kind of like how we work. How do we work in a sustainable way? And as we were talking about before, procurement is a really significant part of that. We've got a great procurement team at the university, and sort of central procurement, who've done lots of really great sector leading work around sustainable procurement. So we met with them a number of times. I think we're still at the stage of trying to understand what can we do. And the key area we're going to be focused on initially is just gathering information from our suppliers who we work with around those suppliers and their carbon reduction plans. We're going to try and drive engagement with an initiative called Net Zero Carbon Futures. That's something that the central procurement team engage with, and we'll try and do our part to also help our vendors engage with that as well. And the final theme is education and engagement, which the library has a really big role in that within the university and beyond, with a range of communities. So it's in terms of thinking, well, what can we do around sustainability in terms of awareness raising, with the resources that we provide access to, with the events that we put on, with exhibitions, with the things that we facilitate, like that sustainability knowledge exchange. So those are, that was my best attempt at kind of trying to map out all the areas of the library's potential contributions, or in some cases areas where we are already doing quite a bit, but hopefully in that way it's something that the colleagues across the library can kind of recognise how it relates to their work. But it was a starting point, and I'm sure we'll continue to redevelop that kind of framework, if you can call it that, over the coming years.
But same as you said earlier, it's adapting all the time anyway, so we can't say for sure this is exactly what we're doing, because we need to move with whatever's moving. Got to move with the tides. And so it sounds like a great start, or even a good process that we're already doing. And you've got to trust that process, haven't we? We've got to to have faith in what we're doing already.
Yeah. I think I can be quite impatient. So I think when I sort of we've mapped out all of this stuff, you just then think, right, okay, we've got it all mapped out, we just need to do it all. And it's, I think that use of the word process is really helpful. It's definitely something I should bear in mind a lot. It's very easy to want to move on everything at the same time, and sometimes it is a case of doing what you can, or as you said before, taking the opportunities when the decision making opportunities come up. It then going, right, now's a chance to go, well, what are the sustainability sort of choices here? What choices could we make within this? Not making a new decision making process, but embedding it into our existing decision making processes.
Think about it right at the beginning, and then it'll hopefully not stop, but at least maybe hinder. I don't know if that's even the right word, but it's in the process already then, and people are not thinking about it. It's not an afterthought, like you said earlier. It's already there. It's already embedded.
Yeah. I mean, there's lots of, the way that we financially account needs to equally now start addressing carbon, so that there's, and the Petland Centre do a lot of work on carbon accounting, and my team and I are working with colleagues in the Petland Centre and in our central finance division to start to understand what how we can treat carbon as an expense as we would any other currency. So we don't, you've mentioned efficiency. People don't like wasting time. People don't like wasting money. What about wasting carbon? It's about bringing it up so that it has parity with all the other things that we give, that we place value on. Because all the while, everything that we continue to do is has a carbon cost. It has a carbon impact as a minimum. I mean, let's not forget that sometimes something that might have a really low carbon impact, for example, our waste as a university, it has a really small carbon footprint, but it has significant other significant environmental impacts once it leaves, even when it's still on our campus, but once it leaves our campus, where's that going? How's it being disposed of? How long is it going to stick around for? That has a legacy that is not just a carbon-based legacy. That's got a significant legacy that we don't track. So although I've talked about carbon too much already, and I like to avoid that sort of carbon tunnel vision, because some of the biggest things that some of the biggest impacts that we have are completely hidden. And if you imagine sustainability to be like an iceberg, the stuff that has the biggest impact is often really, really hidden, and it's almost so embedded that you have to really sort of pull up the tablecloth and think, right, they're talking about this up here, but what's really going on? And that's usually because sustainability hasn't been part of that world. So I'm thinking about things like the way that finance, how we financially invest, who our pension providers are, where they invest. It's gathering traction again in universities, and it's a really interesting topic, because actually, if all universities and their pension providers were to invest overnight in things that weren't, for example, fossil fuels, that would have the weight. The impact that would have would be significant. And we've heard only today on the news that BP are allegedly decelerating their investment in renewable technologies. So, I'd be interested. I'm really interested in things that don't necessarily have an obvious carbon impact or any other impact. That's usually where there's the greatest gains to be made.
Yeah, I think thinking about what you just said, it's not something that I would have thought of. So thank you for that. It's something that I will think of in future, and hopefully the listeners will as well. So just on the back of what you're saying, what do you think is the most successful, most innovative sustainability initiative that Lancaster University have done?
I think that what we're doing on campus, I know what we are doing on campus with our infrastructure is genuinely sector leading. So Tim's already mentioned our amazing procurement team, who are really sector leading. They're doing some sector leading stuff. We are also doing sector leading work within facilities, in making our campus more resilient. So we are by 2028, I think, don't quote me on that, we will have almost eliminated the use of natural gas on campus. And natural gas has roughly the same impact as our international students travelling to us and each year. So roughly the same. So it's significant, and it's our biggest contributor to our Scope 1 emissions. So I feel like the opportunities that are there to learn from the process of improving our infrastructure, becoming more resilient as a campus, locally generating our electricity, reducing our reliance upon the grid, all of that is so ripe with opportunity to learn. And I've done a really interesting piece of work with some colleagues on understanding what the impact of of us simply having bought a solar farm, because essentially we've awarded the contract to Vital Energy, who have gone out and bought all the gubbins that we need for our solar farm. What's the impact of that? What's the reach of that? And it's massive. And it's really, really interesting. But I go back to sort of my opening statement, really, which is you might do something really, really good and really, really well-meaning, but that's never the end of the story. That can't be the end of it. And there's always a trade-off in everything that we do. There is always a trade-off. So the trade-off of us installing a solar farm, which has roughly 17,000 solar panels on it, is each one of those solar panels comes with its own carbon cost.
Okay.
Yeah. So as I've worked with a contractor to come up with a sort of the carbon cost of that project.
It's like a little bit of a ripple effect, isn't it? You've got to remember that it is a ripple effect.
Yeah.
So you might have all good intentions, but think about how it's going
exactly.
after that.
Yeah.
I think that's something that maybe we need to get across more, because you think you're doing great because you're doing one thing, but actually it may not be that way further down. Am I understanding that?
Yeah. And that boils down, that comes to every single decision. Every single decision we make as humans has a trade-off. And that trade-off might not be immediately obvious. But every single thing that we do or don't do has a trade-off. So the trade-off of us, the short-term trade-off of installing the solar farm is that we're going to see a bump in our carbon emissions while we sort of pay back the carbon cost of the solar farm. What it will do in the longer term is, of course, lead to an overall reduction, because we won't be using as much natural gas. We'll be using a fraction of the amount of natural gas that we have now for certain things like Bunsen burners. At the moment, I'm not aware of any alternative way of powering a Bunsen burner, and other sort of smaller uses of natural gas. But essentially, we'll be taking the way that we heat our campus off natural gas, which is significant. So it's not about, and it's one of the things that I loved about teaching is that students thought that there would be a right answer and therefore a wrong answer. And it's never about that. It's about making a decision that is best for you in that context. So what works for me as an individual might not work for Tim, and so on and so forth. And but it's about being more conscientious in how you make a decision. And even if you still decide to do something that has environmental harm, it might have really, positive, a really positive outcome for you as an individual and your well-being. And it's about being aware of what the trade-off is, not necessarily prescribing what is the right or wrong answer. That just turns people off.
Yeah. I think what you said earlier when we were talking about perceptions of sustainability, I didn't say it then, but I was thinking, I think one thing initially people feel that it's very much, it's just going to tell you to stop doing everything. It's just going to tell you like, no, you can't do that. It's going to be very restrictive. You can't do this, you can't do that. It's just, and it's, I think, so there's always going to be an impact of decisions. It's inescapable, particularly in some areas of activity. But it's making informed choices, or having that kind of that part of the decision making process where you just weigh that up, or you've looked at all the available options open to you and made the best choice based on the considerations.
Well, part of me at university is the learning the political thinking, isn't it?
Absolutely.
So that's where this is coming into play, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
It is it's referred to in literature as a wicked problem. And that's what makes it fascinating. It makes it fascinating to research, fascinating to teach, fascinating to talk about. And as a sustainability professional, I absolutely believe I have to keep on learning. I have to keep on putting myself in uncomfortable, unfamiliar conversations, environments, meetings, because that's how you learn. That's how you develop that broader awareness of what are the trade-offs, what are the ripple effects of this decision in all those very different contexts.
Yeah, and no matter what profession it is, you find yourself in uncomfortable conversations, don't you? But it's the only way we can grow.
Exactly.
It's the only way we can learn.
Yeah.
It's by being in those uncomfortable positions.
Yeah.
comfortable but uncomfortable.
Exactly.
Not uncomfortable, comfortable but uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So what are the next steps?
Right. I think the priority for this year, well, I know the priority for this year is I'm working with a group of colleagues across the university in different areas to reassess our business and academic travel guidance. It's a few years old, and we've seen a jump. So not only are we matching pre-COVID levels of international travel, we're comfortably exceeding them now. So last year, our long distance travel drove a 50% increase in flights taken in our business and academic travel. So that's untenable, and it's a really interesting process of hearing all those different points of view of, well, I need, it's important for my faculty or my department to travel because of X, Y, and Z. Everybody's got their reasons, and it's about taking all of that, knowing that what we spit out at the other end is not going to be perfect, but knowing that we can't do nothing. So that's one of my big areas of focus for this year, and it's consultation through committee, I guess. We've got what we call a task and finish group that's looking at this collectively. We will together develop something that is it's a revision and a refreshment of what we've already got, and I guess putting a little bit more, adding a little bit of leverage through things like our funders. A lot of our funders are stipulating that they need to see from us, if we want to carry on winning research grants, they need to see from us evidence of reducing our research related travel. So thankfully there's lots of external drivers now that are now aligning for the first time ever, and it's brilliant. It's such a gift. In a way that I think they're all now realizing that they can't achieve their own Scope 3 targets without us. So now they're addressing their own operations, but also now if whoever they give money to carry out research, they're placing stricter requirements on how that money is spent.
So they've got a little bit of influence on how you're going to move forward.
Yeah.
That's really good. And it feels a bit like you've got a bit of backing in your decisions.
Yeah. We can't hide from it. And we've in November or December, we became a signatory of something called the Concordat for Environmental Sustainability in Research and Innovation Practice. So what that basically is all of the majority of UK funders got together basically to all agree that they can't achieve Scope 3 without the backing of the sector or the cooperation of the sector, should I say. And they've drawn up this Concordat that they have invited higher education organisations and others to support or become a signatory of. But then the Wellcome Trust did something really clever and said, basically, if you want to carry on receiving Wellcome Trust funding, you have to become a signatory. So, when you look, so I've done an analysis of what they're all asking, and no, they're all basically asking for the same thing. So it reinforces the message of, try as we might to bury our heads in the sand about this being really, a really difficult thing. And of course, business and academic travel feels like as you say, like I'm being told I can't do something. That's not fair to me for X, Y, Z reasons. Completely get that. Absolutely accept that. But we can't do nothing. Not if we want to carry on receiving in the region of £35 million of funding every year from these funders.
Yeah, so it's to be addressed, doesn't it?
It has to be addressed, yeah.
So go on, Tim.
I was just going to say next steps, I think, for the library. So like I said, there's three themes. It's really continuing on various bits of work in those three things, in the building spaces, the service delivery, and the education engagement. So the building is, just continues to look for efficiencies in terms of how we operate the building, and we're doing some really interesting work with colleagues in facilities on that at the moment. It's great that in the future we'll benefit from that investment in the sustainable campus, and that we'll be able to say that the library's powered by renewable energy, but in the meantime we can just do whatever we can to be as efficient as possible, really. With the service delivery, like I say, it's that procurement piece of work, which is a big piece of work, and I've got to remind myself that it's a really significant big piece of work. It's going to be quite sure. It's a process. Yeah, it's a process. It's a process. It's a good telling now. And on the education and engagement, I think it's looking for more opportunities to host events or facilitate events. The university is currently embarked on its curriculum transformation program, and part of that is going to involve embedding sustainability throughout future Lancaster programs, like through all courses at the university. So there's a role for the library there around access to resources, around education, around around sustainability, and what could our role be there. So that's a really interesting area to explore there. So yeah, lots of plans, but yes, it's a process.
It's a process, and we're going to be adapting all the time, as we've already said. So lastly, what advice have you received or would you give to other universities who are looking to improve their sustainability? One tip.
Look for those points of intervention. Don't feel like you have to start new conversations and invite people to who you think might be interested. Find how sustainability is relevant implicitly or explicitly to your colleagues, and that really sort of fast tracks that sort of collaboration, opportunities for collaboration, opportunities for cooperation and interest.
Yeah, I think it's drumming up the interest. It's probably not the right word. There's probably a nicer phrase for that, but it's getting people to be interested and take accountability, I think, as well. I think that's quite a big key.
Yeah, I think for me, the biggest piece of advice would just be to collaborate and learn from others. Like, I was thinking when I was first sort of given this brief, you just think, oh, this is huge. How am I going to do this? And it's not about that. I think, we're really fortunate to have a fantastic sustainability team at the university and fantastic colleagues in procurement and so on. But yeah, it's just been, it's not just, these problems aren't just ours to solve.
No.
There's lots of expertise in lots of areas around the university which is transferable, where we can learn from them and apply it to our context. But ultimately, you have to start somewhere, and it is a process. It's a journey. So I think you can't be put off by that, but just be very open to collaborate and learn from others.
Thank you very much. Thank you for such an interesting episode. It's something that I don't know a great deal about, so I've learned a lot already. Just chatting, just this conversation. And what I've picked up a lot about is communication is key and collaboration is key. And let's all talk to each other, and it's not just one person's problem. It's everyone's, and we need to think about it. So thank you very much, both of you. And
very much.